Okay, so let's give this a shot. So what I like to use, after painting, I'll use 220 to dry sand it. I don't really dry sand with anything above 220. It's not really, I don't know, I've just never done it. Once you start wet, the paint piles on thicker than the sanding at 320. But I like to use this flexible sandpaper. It's like really nice. Used to be able to buy it in sheets at the hardware store. I've only found it online now in this big roll. So let's just give this guy a sanding. So this, like I said, auto body primer, like one nice double coat, and then 2 coats of the filler primer, and sat overnight. So this is what surprised me when I sanded it and it just filled everything in right away like that. You know, and see, it blows right out. It's just the dust, but when we wet sand that, it'll start to live inside those little holes. So I'll keep going with this. You just want to sand your surface smooth. It's going to be really crumbly after it gets painted. This flexible paper is really nice because you don't have to worry about scratching it in the corners. It's just, you know, because it isn't scratchy. You can see that the paint dust is picked up. But now it's really nice and smooth. So this will be ready for another coat before I wet sand it. Since I sanded that extra paint off, I don't want to wet sand this because it'll just start taking up the paint that we want there as a base. That'll be no good. That's a little rough in there still. All right. So this guy, what I have for wet sanding is I got some 600. I might use that later at the very last bit. 320, that's what I'm gonna go with first. And then 400 is usually what I do all the wet sanding with. It's a really nice, like, smooth grit, but it's also gritty enough to actually do some work. If you get too high grit too fast, you're not gonna pull up any of the paint. You need to have some grit there. And then I like to use my paint cap, and I like to soak the paper in the water for a little bit. It's been here for about 10 minutes. Just it helps soften up the paper, and then it stays more wetter. And then I'll just dip it to get more water as I go. So this one is the 320. This one's the 400, the yellow one. Double check that. Yep, 320 is that brown. So now this is really soft and pliable. And I like to go really circular like this. You really want to build up this, like, kind of slurry of paint. And that's just going to get pushed into all the holes. And what's nice about this filler primer material is that it's really thick. It's got a lot of body to it. So I'm filling up the holes really quickly, as far as not like with the number of strokes I'm doing, but just the fact that this is only the second painting and it's almost all full is really nice. Keep that water. You want to have enough water so that you can make something happen as far as it making this kind of paint slurry. And I'm putting I'm pushing down just a little bit. Just gonna work that paint in there and seal up the surface. You can see, this is kind of a bummer actually. Maybe you can see it in the light. There's like a dent right across there. This isn't the piece I'm going to use, I don't think, so I'm not worried about it. If it were, I'd have to fix that. So I'll move on to the sides and these chamfers. I want to be careful around the edges because the edges will sand off quicker than the flat surfaces just by the shape of your fingers. And I don't want to break the paint on any of those corners. All right, that seems okay. So then I like to have a t-shirt type material cloth like I mentioned around. You can dry it off. Now this is interesting how I think I need to wet sand it more. It looks like the paint's a little bit too chunky right there. Like that's not gonna fill as much. I wanna take a little more off on the sides. I like the way this came out right here. This side looks really good. So this would take another coat of paint. Another wet sanding would be really close. Let's do this side just a little bit more. It is softer, this paint. I can feel it. So I want to be careful when I'm putting on my next coat to not put it on too heavy. I like the finish to be really hard. It's just more durable that way. I mean, this isn't going to take a ton of abuse. It needs to get cast once. Yeah, that's nicer. That's better. And this is what you would do when you're done. Each wet sanding is you want to, buff it down with a rag to dry it off and to push in that paint, push it down. Make sure all the moisture dries off before you go ahead and paint it again. Yeah, and that's wet sanding. Maybe if I get further along, I'll do another video of the last one, but basically it's just doing this several times until all these holes get filled up and you get a nice sealed surface. I'll put some joint compound in that one right now before I paint it. And at that point, maybe I'll wipe it into these other deep holes. Just a little bit on the surface, let it dry, sand it really quick with some dry sandpaper, maybe the soft 220. I use these sheets over and over again so they get weaker and weaker as far as the grit. And then that'll be ready for another painting and wet sanding and it'll be done. It looks good, I like it. I'm psyched to get this one painted again. I'll probably just do one coat. Maybe I could sand it a little bit further and put some joint compound on it now before I do that second coating of the filler primer. I have this leftover bucket of joint compound. Now, it doesn't matter how gross I get this on here because when I sand it, everything on the surface is going to sand right off. And the only thing that'll stay is what's in these holes. But you don't want the joint compound to be more than just in the holes, because then your paint finish will really suffer. And the other thing you want to do when you're putting joint compound on here, if you leave any on the surface, like a good amount, you got to make sure your paint, you at least get 2 coats over that, because if you wet sand through the crispy outer of the paint into the joint compound with that wet sanding, you will have a disaster. That is very difficult to fix. You'll see that edge forever. All right, I'm gonna let that dry. And then I'll come back and I'll show you it being sanded. We'll do it that way. All right, so this is pretty dry. I'm gonna go ahead and that's nice. So we really want to get it off the surface. This is 220 as well. I just use it right on the table so I can have a flat surface. This one isn't as flat. I put more of a little bit of a bevel over it so I would have draft angle, because the mold is going to separate here. And so this whole surface has to have a draft so that the mold will come off. So if you do use joint compound, definitely you can just sand it right back down. You don't want a lot of it underneath your paint. And you want to build up the paint again, enough over it so you won't be sanding through to it. So that's good. I'll keep sanding this. Maybe I'll edit it out later. You just have to be really patient when you're trying to finish this material. Either just do it like this, 1 or 2 simple coats. This makes it so anyone can handle it. You give it 1 sanding, and then you can put it in people's hands. They can feel your form. You can feel it, see how it works, and that's it. Your model's done. You don't need to go to this extreme unless you're trying to make a finished piece. All right. Let you know how it goes next. All right, y'all. So I just finished editing up that video. Thought I'd show you the finished result. I did like 2 more rounds of painting and wet sanding. This is the finished. I'm really happy with it. Sealed up well. It'll be good for casting. It's all clean. The lines are good. I'm happy. I hope this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed a little demo action. All right, peace.